was talking to the baker and he told me that Egypt was based on a wheat-based diet. That's what they had. And I said, but I've not seen any wheat grown. He said, we import it all. And I thought, oh my goodness. The first time that there's a shortage and the flour goes up by, say, £100 a tonne for Britain, it'll go up £100 a tonne on the world market, £100 a tonne for Egypt, which will be equivalent of £1,000 a tonne or £2,000 a tonne in Britain. The equivalent, they wouldn't be able to eat, and therefore they would start rioting. And there we have the Arab Spring. There's a lovely bit on Tahrir Square on the graffiti. He said, "We don't need no." I've taken the swear word out. We don't need no beer, meaning the Ayatollahs who were trying to say that, you know, do other things. We need bread. We're hungry. And I remember in the 1970s, my first job as a child was I rode shotgun on a bread van. And we had to send, if you remember, there were some bread strikes, and you couldn't actually get bread. And we were having our wagons stolen for the load. We kept the wagon back, but not its contents. And so we sent every wagon out with 3 drivers on it. And I was a young lad. I was given a pickaxe sample and told to hit anybody that comes near the load. And I have to say I was absolutely petrified. But we were being attacked. Food people were being attacked because there was no bread. People were genuinely hungry. So we've got, it is the stuff of revolution. I mean, the thing is, bread is also slow to change. There's a lovely thing that, somebody said that the biggest 2 things that have happened to bread, the 2 inventions in bread making, has been roller milling and the invention of the Chorleywood bread process in 1961. And I thought, my goodness me, if these innovations come any quicker, I won't be able to cope. Because bread is pretty much stable, and it's a very old-fashioned and steady industry, which just brings us to the thing underneath. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. So because Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And bread is pretty old bread making. There's a photograph there of a tomb in Egypt that I took that photograph in Colombo, and of people making bread. And then you've got things like it was a baker that started the fire of London. Not the finest day, I have to say, for baking, but I think we got away with it. The first consumer laws were the 1200s assize of bread and ale, and where the law was to protect consumers from bakers. And it's where we get the phrase a baker's dozen from, because the penalty for selling underweight bread was that a baker would eventually be perhaps hung, drawn and quartered, or in the early stages it would be strapped to a cart and dragged around the streets for people to pelt nasty things at, and the ovens would be smashed to pieces and burnt down for selling underweight bread. Now, thankfully, the penalties are not quite so great today, but the laws were there, and we think about the law in Scripture, and how we see the law and how we see Jesus. There's the laws that strapped people to carts and caused something, horrible. And then for me, there's the law of Jesus, which is something far greater, that says, well, actually, why does the baker give 13 to the dozen? Because why would you want to cheat your customers? So I would rather give 13 away for the price of 12 than be thought to be a cheat. Why would you want to do that? For me, that's the difference between the law and the Spirit, which is Jesus. We look up now, bread is different everywhere. There's a thing called, if I said tea cake, do you know what I mean? It's a flat piece of bread that's got a crust all around it, and it's got no currants in it. That's a tea cake. Tea cake, not tea cake, tea cake. Because we're from Barnsley. Right? Does anybody call it something else? Right. A cob, right? And what was it from London? A roll, a cob. Anybody else? A bat, yeah. A bread cake, yeah. Yeah, they're uncivilized in Chesterfield, that's why. Yeah, we are right, everybody else is wrong. So yeah, and what we've got is we've got this product. You know, you say roll, I say bat. It's the same product that's throughout the world, and it just has a different name. And the reason it comes, why the places that would call it a tea cake, I've tried to figure out there are 3 places that I know. One is Barnsley, one is Dewsbury, the other one is Kirkham in Lancashire. And all those towns have one thing in common, is that their industry at one time was the linen industry. Not the woolen industry, the linen industry. And the origins of a tea cake are that it was, you could put your lunch on it, and because the crust was on the outside and it had a slightly higher fat level in it, it would not go dry in the heat of the linen mill, which was different from woolen mills, because in woolen areas they don't call it that, but it's the same product. And there's all sorts of different products all over, you know, all over the UK that have their own individual specialities, you know, their individual characteristics. We've got some more there. We've got some crumpets there, some muffins. Different types of British, we call them pikelets. What's the difference between a pikelet and a crumpet? Well, pikelet's that thick and a crumpet's that thick, yeah. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it's whatever you want to call it, where a crumpet's made in a ring and a pikelet is free-flowing, it's been allowed to flow out on the griddle. We look at we go into the regions, you know, we've got things like Scottish breads, and you know, we've got there the Selkirk bannock and the batch bread, which is baked as a loaf, and it has a special oven, and all the loaves baked together without a tin, and they tear them apart so it's got no end crusts. And the other one, which is, when I talk to Scottish people, they always, well not always, but very often they cower in embarrassment at the burnt loaves, because they're called well halved. And if you go into certain areas of Glasgow, all the bread is burnt absolutely black, because that's how they like it. They call it well halved bread. Now the problem with it is that there's a thing called acrylamide that forms on burnt products, which is in fact carcinogenic. It causes cancer, right? But when you're having deep fried Mars bars, you know, really nice. We look into places like Northern Ireland, and I have to say, I absolutely love Northern Ireland. If you ever get the chance to go to Northern Ireland, my favourite place, I think, or one of my favourite places in the world. So there's a bread out there called Vida bread, which is something to be tasted well. And they have this thing called the wheaten loaf, which is that thing that's sliced on the right-hand side. And everybody says that their wheaten loaf is the original wheaten loaf. And every bakery that you visit says everybody else is a fake, and mine's the real one. Everybody says it. And I've yet to find out the true wheaten loaf. But I guess you could say that about Yorkshire and the tea cakes, I suppose. We look into Wales, and we've got the Farabrith and the Becheldry, I think it's called, the Becheldry, forgive my Welsh pronunciation if you're Welsh. And, you know, that's baked in a flower pot. And then there's lava bread, which I'm sure you know is seaweed, nothing whatsoever to do with it. We've got some more specialty breads. If you go into Cornwall, you'll get a different flavour altogether. You've got the Sally Lung. Can you see the Sally Lung there with the icing on it? There's the London Bloomer and all sorts of different products. And into Staffordshire. Anybody from Staffordshire? There you go, from Staffordshire. You're into oatcakes, aren't you? Yeah, they have like oatcake shops instead of fish and chip shops. They have oatcake shops. Am I right? And you go and you get your oatcakes and they wrap them up in stuff up in them, don't they? And you have a hot oatcake. That's crazy. You want to go now, don't you? Just a try. Staffordshire Tourist Board. We then move into things like Western Europe, and we've got some examples on the table there. We've got beautiful open textures. The one at the bottom right-hand corner is called a fougasse, which is from France. We've got things like focaccia, which is in fact, to me it just looks like somebody's got a bit of dough, chucked it on a baking tray and flattened it out and thrown it in the oven, which is exactly what it is really. And it's actually Italian peasant bread. But then there's the thing at the top right, which is called an épée, which is Belgian, and it's a French stick cut in a particular way. So we've got these lovely different types of breads from all over. Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. So bread is all over the world. Wherever you go, you will find bread of some sort. Got some more Western breads there. So we're moving into Holland now and into Spain. We've got the sin cortado bread, the bimbo one, which has got no crust on it for people that don't want a hairy chest. And there's the one that looks like the lemon on the right-hand side. Does anybody recognise that? The one on the right-hand side in the centre. Anybody recognise it? It's Papo Secos, it's called. Nando's. You go to Nando's, it's a Nando's roll. You get a sandwich at Nando's, it'll be on one of those. Yeah. Tell the demographic here, can't you?
Nando's has only just arrived in Barnsley.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then we've got the one that people call tiger bread or giraffe bread. As somebody said, are we? Hello there, is it me? And actually, it's called Dutch Crunch, is what it's called. And it originates from Holland. We then move into some more Western breads, and there's a bread over there that I've brought, which is very similar to a bread called Pumpernickel, which literally translates as the devil's fart. Nickel, old Nick, pump of old Nick, right? So that's what it translates, so that's what it means. But equally, let's move on from that. The pretzel, the nice shaped thing that comes out of different regions of Germany, and they all have a different one. It's supposed to symbolise the angel praying. That's its symbolism. So you get that in a lot of breads. There is faith-based symbolism in much of the bread, even though you don't know it. We move into things like some more Eastern European breads, for example. Is it big or is it not working?
No, it's not.
Anyway, how's that? Well, I've included this lovely phrase. It's one of my favourite bits from the Old Testament, from 2 Kings, because it just makes me go, yes, yes. You know, Elisha was walking along the road, and some boys came out from the town and jeered at him. Get out of here, Baldy. He said, get out of here, Baldy. He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled the boys to death. And it just makes... is that un-Christian? It's just one yes. And the reason I've included the thing about the bear is because the bread that's in the middle, the one that looks like it's got nuts in it, is the best bread I've ever tasted in my life. And it's from a bakery in Latvia, near Riga, called Laci Bakery. And Laci means bear, the bear bakery. So that's why I just thought I'd put it in, because it's one of my favourite bits from the Bible. So there it is, that's a beautiful bread. If you ever get to Riga in Latvia, you have to ask for the Laci Bakery and you'll get some utterly beautiful bread. We're looking to North America now, where everything is...
That's better.
Is it? Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Right. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Yeah. So we look at that, we've got the sub-rolls, which are in fact called po' boys or poor boys. And the origins of that bread is that it was feeding the poor during the Great Depression. They fed the poor. So again, bread is very central to feeding everybody in times of distress and in times of poorness. Bread is a fairly cheap commodity that fills you up, and so bread forms the basis of the basic diet. I put in the bit from Martin's. There's some Martin's potato rolls there, because the company called Martin's, if you ever look on the internet for their products, they're utterly devout Christians and run their entire bakery on utterly devout Christian principles. If I just get rid of that, can you hear me at the back?
Yeah.
If I shout out, okay. Yeah. Right, so we've got these North American breads, usually high in fat. That's why they keep so well. Here's an interesting one. We've got a donut, a bagel, and a bread roll. And you know the difference?
Oh.
Heaven knows the difference, don't you? It's how they're cooked. Because a bread roll is baked. If you took the pieces of dough that we've had, more or less, and we decided that we're going to fry some, they will be donuts.
Yeah.
If we decided we were going to boil them, they would become bagels. If we decided to bake them, they would be bread rolls. That's the only difference. Okay, you might change the recipe a little bit to make it nicer, but that's the difference. Moving into Latin America, and you get the key thing is that wherever you go in the world, if you look at the bread, you will find something about the culture. Just as if you look at the churches, you will find something about the culture. And so you get Latin America with lots of flatbreads, because they're actually making the bread on what they've got locally. And so there's also this tapioca bread that they make, because they have tapioca locally. And one of the things that we've got problems with at the moment is that one of the greatest suppliers of wheat in the world is in fact the Ukraine. And so because the Russians have bombarded the ports, and then the farmers are not going to be growing for next year, we're heading for quite a big problem. And it is really, when you're working in the industry, it's scary. And, you know, I don't want to dwell on scariness, but I think the need to share and the need to look after each other will become far greater in the coming months than it has been. So, things that we think that, you know, war in Ukraine doesn't seem to affect us, except the fact that I couldn't get any sunflower oil, because they also grow sunflower seeds there, but hey ho, it will. We move into the Middle East there with some lovely Middle Eastern breads, and again, you've got different products. They're more or less the same, but they have a bit of a twist, and they call them something different. So you've got like the Armenian lavash, naan breads, of course, from the India region, chapatis, parathas, and a koob from Lebanon. And you can buy all these, of course, in the United Kingdom. We move on then to the Asia-Pacific region and into China, and you get some lovely breads. Believe it or not, those white things are in fact fully cooked. That's not dough, that is bread. It's from China. They're steamed buns. They're not baked, they're steamed. And then you've got the one that the Japanese, of course. You might be able to tell the Japanese one because they're always brightly coloured and like a manga cartoon. And then there's the pork floss rolls from Singapore, which again, if you get to Singapore, go to a bakery called Bread Talk, have some of their pork floss rolls, utterly beautiful. Then we move on to health. And of course, one of the big things that we've got at the moment is salt reduction. The reduction of salt. And we've got the reduction of salt in bread, and forgive me for saying that we've got the reduction of salt in Christianity. Because we need to be more salty in the world. That's what we're called to be. And you know, as Matthew 5:13 says, Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again?" He's basically saying it's only fit for road grit, isn't it? Throw it down and jump on it. You know, so the government are trying to get people to lower their blood pressure, and so they're putting targets on us that's gradually lowering the amount of salt. So if you ever thought that bread doesn't taste like it used to be, you're absolutely right, it doesn't. Because it's got less salt in it by government statute. And you'll then you see other things. If you want a bread that has got a low GI, has anybody ever low GI breads? It's a low glycemic index. It basically means it keeps you fuller for longer, and that means it's got big bits in it. So have you noticed how posh food's got big bits in it? Like sausages. If you go and buy a Richmond sausage, it's all like bologna, isn't it? But if you buy a really expensive sausage, it's got bits of meat in. And it's the same with bread. Posh food has got big bits, and poor food is all mashed up, like the difference between a fish and a fish finger. You know what I mean? It's or a burger a cheap burger versus a steak. You know what I mean? Posh food, you have to chew it more. And that's the same with bread. There's an interesting one there. There's a bread called Bergen, which has got some phytoestrogenic compounds in there, linseed, for example, which is good for women's health. Thought to be good for women's health. And then you've got high fibre bread and Vogels, and you've got things like Vitbis and Hovis and all those types of bread, which are supposed to have some sort of health benefit. We move on now to faith breads. There are some breads which we would openly know are faith breads. We've got the thing in the middle, the chola or challah, however you pronounce it, the Jewish bread, which is for their Sabbath day. And the only explanation I can find about that is that somebody said, a rabbi said, it's got the complexity in it. If you look at it, the platin is like the complexity. He says that says about the complexity and the mystery of God, that we've got this complex bread. So they use that particularly on there. There's a lovely recipe, if you want to make some nice bread, in the book of Ezekiel. You can buy bread which is made from that recipe, which is pretty healthy, I have to say, if you nutritionally look at it. Very good. Well, it would be from the Bible, isn't it? Because it's Bible right. You've got things like hot cross buns. Did you have your hot cross buns at Easter? Yeah. Which are in fact nothing to do with Christianity. They are pagan. The 4 quarters signify the 4 seasons of the year. They are way before Christianity is this particular product. Because if it was Christian, it would be oval and the cross would be a crucifix. As indeed some bakers make them like that. But it's in fact, you know, it's a pagan product that we have adopted. And we have brought it in, as indeed there are many things that faith share. There's the panettone. Has anybody had Italian Christmas bread? Which again is merely a mistake that happened one year for the king, and I think the cook spoiled the dinner, and so rumbled up this bread to save his neck being chopped off, his head being chopped off. And his name was Tony, and he was called Tony's bread, panettone, and it's panettone. That's bread. And of course, the stollen one, you see the stollen at the bottom, the Christmas stollen, signifies Jesus wrapped in swaddling clothing. Jesus is in the middle, the piece of marzipan in the middle, and the outer are the white cloths. And that's the symbolism of a stollen, and why we would eat a stollen at Christmas. I've only put this free from him because Jeff's in the room. And Jeff has, don't mind me saying, you've got an intolerance to gluten. And so various people have, you know, I can remember the days when nobody had an intolerance, just got on with it, but but today, you know, if you've got something, I mean, I have 2 food intolerances, so I can't scoff. And of course, those breads used to be awful, and now are getting quite nice. So everybody can enjoy. And in fact, am I right in saying that the communion in a Methodist church always includes the option of a gluten-free bread, isn't it? I think at conference it's all gluten-free. It's like you've got this Jeff, you're a trendsetter. And we've got lots of different flavours. The lovely bread that runs vertical is in fact about a yard high when you see it, and it's Canadian Manouche bread. It comes from a company called Manouche Bakery in Canada. There's all sorts of different types of bread. Herby breads, flavoured breads, marbled breads, tear and share breads. And the different flavours that come with bread. You know, that you get different seed combos. And the one that's multicoloured at the bottom in the centre is called an Italian stradella, which has 3 doughs together, 1 green, 1 red, 1 white, symbolising the flag of Italy. It's a stradella. And I mean, even chocolate bread, we've made chocolate bread, and you can buy things like that. But what this symbols to me is that it's the one bread, and yet it's got different flavours. So where you go in the world, and as we go around, it sort of says to me that we might be Methodist or Baptist or whatever we are, but we're actually all to the one Jesus. There's one bread, but yet it has many different flavours and takes many forms, and the form that it takes doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the Catholics do things different from the Church of England, from the Baptist. It doesn't really matter, provided we're all focusing on Jesus, the one true bread. And there's another thing, I just thought I'd put this in for you, which is what you can find is that some breads taste different, and it's only bread. It's not flavoured with anything other than bread. And depending on when you're fermenting the bread, we've got the rolls there are all rising up now and fermenting away. Oh my goodness, we brought fermentation into the church. Oh dear. Yes, there is alcohol in bread, believe it or not. Only very tiny amounts because we put it in the oven and we send the alcohol up the chimney. So you're okay, you won't get drunk, apparently, unless you eat about 50 kilos of bread, in which case you'll be very full. But depending on the stiffness of your dough and the temperature at which you ferment it, with exactly the same ingredients, will make your bread taste different. So we come here now to the final slide, which is this. So bread and Jesus. Bread is ancient. Jesus is ancient. Bread is modern. Jesus is modern. It's a basic food deep in human culture. And Jesus is basic, deep in our culture. Food for the body, food for the soul. Jesus, the stuff of revolution. It's local, it's international, it's eaten everywhere. And proven, it's at the centre of human health. And even if you're not Christian, you've got to say, well, Jesus is them things. You've got to respect him, haven't you? You've got to respect him, even if you're not. But this is the bread, the one true bread that we follow. And that's me finished for my bit now. What we're going to do now is we're going to have an act of worship. We'll have a few minutes just to prepare it. I think we're going to sing about Jesus the bread. And we're going to have a love feast, which is a bit like communion but a little less formal. And the bread that we're going to use for it is the bread that you have made.
John, if people have questions, could we just do a few questions? Because I noticed somebody's hand up.
Oh, right, okay. That's questions, yeah.
It wasn't a question, John, but the Jewish bread that you said it was battered together.
Yes.
I thought you might like to know that in the Ukraine, when two people are married, they have a circle of bread, which is like that, and it's to represent the joining together and the no beginning and no end kind of thing. And it's all wrapped in the way that you said how life is very complex and so on. And and it's a very, very special part of that ceremony. And then that ring of bread is broken and it's given to all the guests. So I just thought it fitted really well.
It does fit very well, yeah. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Jewish
Thank you for that, that's
explanation.
really good, yeah. Any other?
Yeah, is it true in France, by law, they have to bake twice a day? And is that because the flour, I know there's preservatives in, but it doesn't last as long?
That's because of French. There is the traditional baguette, what we call the traditional baguette, by law must not contain fat. And so what makes bread keep is predominantly fat. So for example, if you get a lardy cake, very high in fat, you probably keep it for months. You get a baguette which has no fat in it, and you not keep it for an hour. And so I think the not by law you have to bake it twice a day. I think by the fact that your customers won't come back and buy bread that was baked this morning, you have to bake it twice or 3 times a day. I think it's, but I don't particularly know about that. You know, it's.
You can't see Frenchmen walking about at lunchtime because we've got the second bake.
With one under the arm, which what gives the distinctive flavour of French bread. I've always said that. Anything else?
You mentioned that one or two will be made by accident, like
Yes.
You were in your lifetime,
Never. On a daily basis. I'm trying to think of, can we think of any?
I just want to think, I know Elaine comes up, you sprouts in bread once, didn't you?
Oh gosh, yeah. There's all sorts of things that we do. We've got one customer, yeah, Sprouts was an interesting one. And what was the other one? Smarties.
Baked beans.
Baked bean bread. And the other one was, I once did a presentation to a customer in London, and this was a Vivienne Westwood type woman in the food industry who was all powerful, utterly bonkers as a fruitcake, aggressive, and is a well-known character. And she was eating the bread, and I put some jelly snakes in it. You know those little jelly snakes in it. And as she got up, she goes, because she always used to call me boy. What's this, boy? What's this? And I said, it's witchetty grub. With which she went. There was another one. She requested that we send her some. She wanted to make a Thai sandwich for a Thai menu. So she says, can we send her some Thai wraps? So I packaged up some Thai wraps and sent them just as a joke. So we do have fun on occasion. We do daft stuff. But think of mistakes. They're happening all the time. There's one that's an interesting one. Have you seen the very dark brown product that's there, the chestnutty brown one? Can you just hold it up for everybody? Yeah. It's not that particular one. There's the one that's dark on the outside. There's a fat roll there. The pretzel one. It's the nearest to me, on the corner. It's the surface of the bread looks like a conker, doesn't it? Really, can you see it? Now that was a mistake, I understand, from a German baker or Austrian baker many years ago, who was glazing his product, and he put the wrong thing in the wrong container, and ended up glazing it with toilet cleaner, with sodium hydroxide. And what that does is we have a machine that does this. You basically bathe the product in sodium hydroxide. And as the guys are doing it, you have to wear a visor and a big boots and a rubber gauntlets and everything, because if you get it on you, it'll burn you. It really is awful stuff. And you push the bread rolls through it, and then we slit them. And it's what pretzels are done in. And it causes a reaction called the Maillard reaction, which is that deep browning. And it was an accident because he used the wrong thing. And then ate it and thought, well, actually, this tastes quite nice. And he was still there tomorrow, so it was okay. And that's usually a good sign, isn't it, that you never trust a slim baker. Wait, did I say that? So that's one accident from the industry. And it has a unique taste. The pretzels have an incredible taste that comes from this use of lye, of sodium hydroxide. So, but I mean, I don't know if anybody goes through Mapplewell and people say to me, oh, that smell. The smell, isn't it wonderful? We can't smell it, but we can smell when something's wrong. And one day, I was driving to work, I got to the four lane ends of Mapplewell, which is about, 500, 600 yards away, and I knew something was wrong at the bakery. I knew it was wrong. I got to the bakery and said, we've got a problem. I said, what's it? I said, I don't know what it is, but there's a problem. Something's burning. Because we can smell when something's gone wrong. Or you can smell the seasons. The first batch of hot cross buns you can smell. You can smell when, my accountant can smell when we bake in the German rye Pumpernickel, because it makes him want to vomit. Right? which is what, what the guy who did it said, this bread smells like, right? And my accountant thinks that, and we can smell that, because it's a particular time of day. But I got to work and I said, there's something wrong. And My engineering team looked right through the bakery and they said, we can't find anything. Sorry, you've got to continue until you find out what is causing that smell. In the bakery, we couldn't smell it, only at the falling ends. We had an oven on fire. We lifted a pan off the oven and it just burst into flames. And we had an oven on fire and I could smell it down the road, but I couldn't smell it in the bakery. Because all the extract fans. It was an interesting thing when COVID hit. Bakeries tend to have, one of the stories that hit when COVID hit was that people in a factory in Wombwell were dying of COVID, and they all worked, and there were people dying throughout Germany, and they were working in chilled food factories, chilled meat factories, abattoirs and things like that. Well, that's basically one big fridge where you've no circulation of air, but you don't have fresh air. In a bakery, it's totally different. We have air conditioning in our bakery, but what we're doing is we're bringing air in from outside and extracting it as fast as we can. So you've always got that flow of air coming through a bakery. So you always smell things outside a bakery that you might not smell inside it. So when the COVID hit, we actually worked out what the horsepower of each fan was and what the movement of air was through the factory. We were told that it takes 15 minutes of exposure to expose somebody to COVID, and we had an air exchange in our bakery every 5 minutes. So you could stand next to somebody and you still wouldn't be standing next to them because the wind's blowing through you so much. And so the air balance in bakeries is interesting. And one of my old bakers always used to say that you can tell which way the wind's blowing because the oven behaves differently. Now, whether that's true or not, we've got microprocessors and computers controlling everything these days, so probably it'll even itself out. But yes, you can, they always say every oven has a personality. You know your oven at home, and you get it, it's almost got a personality. I think you change your oven, and it don't bake anything like the one you did. And if you bake at the top and you bake at the bottom, and you bake at the left-hand side, you bake at the right-hand side, you've got to know its personality. And that's all very well, but what happens when it's half as big as this room? Which we've got two that are that size. So it's how we control it. So, any other questions? We do, yes, we do. We now actually, we're exporting about, it's just over 17% of what we manufacture. Our main export market is France. So I have to say that quietly because they don't like it. If you think about it, we look at the white sliced loaf and think that it's something ordinary to our society. Nothing special, pretty boring, pretty dull, just bread. But we see a baguette and we think, ooh, how lovely. Ooh, isn't that lovely? But then, what does the French guy think? Our bread sells for a lot more money in France because it's seen as something a bit different. And so, the other thing is, has anybody been to France for the holidays? Yeah. Have you traveled to France? Who loved the French bread? Who couldn't wait to get back for a bacon sandwich on a tea? See what I'm saying? So yeah, France, but we also export to, we send some Christmas goods to Hong Kong, and some goods to Dubai, and to, we have a customer in Singapore as well. And we're just, there was a discussion in our sales office today about Jordan and the price. And somebody thought they said Katie Price, and that's Jordan Price. But it was in fact somebody wanted the price of some bread for a customer in Jordan. Right? And there was all sorts of things that went off. And to be fair, I didn't quite understand what everybody was talking about, which is an age thing, I think. So, and we've sent bread to lots more countries. We have a distributor in Spain as well. Anywhere else?
I was going to say Spain.
Yeah, Spain, yeah. And so, quite a few countries, yeah. But it's just over 17.5% of what we make now goes abroad. And believe it or not, it costs about the same to deliver to Singapore as it does to deliver to Darwin.
Wow.
Now, how do you work that one out?
Wow.
No, they take a full container. If somebody wants bread from us in Darwin, they won't a dozen a day. When somebody wants it in France, they take a full articulated lorry full. And so you deliver it by that and you get the economies of scale. It's about the same delivery cost.
So is it all cooked everything, or do you send?
Everything is baked, yes.
Oh, you send it
Frozen.
Yes. You've said the wrong word, haven't you? Cooked. Bakers don't cook, we bake. You don't have to hurt a man. The bakers bake, cooks cook. So when I referred to donuts and bagels, I referred to cooking, because they're cooked, not baked. But we are bakers, so we bake. Yeah, everything that we make is fully baked or nearly fully baked. You know, so because it will be baked for a particular reason. So we'll bake it so that it's frozen. So if we're going to try a bread, we'll bake it, freeze it, and bring it back from the freezer to test whether it's okay or not. Because bread that might be okay fresh might be bad from the freezer, and equally bread that you know, the other way around. You know, you might have a bread that tastes horrible. I took some bread to my dad, and he said, "This bread is horrible." I said, "Stick it in your fridge, Dad, and bring it back in a week's time. Tell me then what it's like." And he went, "Oh, it's really nice a week later. It's really quite nice because it was designed for that." You know what I mean? You can do all sorts of things. So I have a slide that I've not put on here for you. It's hidden. It's on my presentation, but it's hidden. All about enzymatic control of breads, but the whole that's not Jesus. So we can do all sorts of things with bread. We can control it, but it's a little bit like I always say, the master mariner. Does the master mariner control the seas? No. The best we can do with bread is to learn to live with it, to learn to live with the changing seasons and the changing crops, and how things, the changing weather and the changing humidity. And we learn, if we're really good, we learn to live with that. And there's something about Christianity in that, isn't it? We're not trying to, we're not trying to command the world. We're just trying to live as best we can